So we'll start the session with my introduction. So myself Jay, and I have overall 9 years of work experience in cybersecurity and data privacy, working on different segments of data privacy implementation, data privacy assessments, and data privacy program management. And I hold certifications including CIPP, CIPM, CISA, FIPT, OneTrust, and a full-time MBA in IT Business Management. So that's the short introduction about me. And I think without delay, let's get started. So we'll quickly run through the agenda. The agenda for this session is we'll be starting with data privacy. Today, we'll be covering topics on data privacy and its need, certification data for data privacy, CIPP introduction and coverage, how to prepare for the exam, and my exam experience and exam strategy. That's going to be a very important section, I would say, and InfoSec training for data privacy courses. Let's get started. So what is data privacy? And for folks who are tuning in, maybe who are very new to data privacy, or who want to really understand what is this particular field is, I'll start with a very basic definition. Data privacy is the ability of individuals to determine who can access their personal information and protection of personal data from those who should not access it. So it's very simple definition, and it's very important for you to understand what and where it all started. So data privacy is a concept that is getting very popular, and everyone understands that it gained its momentum after GDPR, but it's a concept that has been there for last 60, 70 years, and it gained significance post World War II, and that is where the privacy as a fundamental right started, and it is one of important rights which is protected and preserved in European nations, and it has a wide popularity across the globe. And when we say data privacy, so we get into the nuance of into the data lifecycle protection. And so when we come into this horizon, then there is a very interesting question that many people often get confused, is between then what is privacy and what is data security, right? So many people have this question in their head, and I thought I'll start with this particular concept. So for many people who are maybe starting this topic for the first time, or maybe this is a question even they have to be sorted. So when I say data privacy, data privacy, as I said, is a concept that revolves with the data lifecycle, and it's something goes beyond your confidentiality, integrity, and availability. As I said, it involves about a data subject and his rights to protect the personal information, as well as preventing the data from any external interference. And when I say information security, many people would be aware of it. It's a foundational set of services that predominantly revolve around protecting the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So we often call it as the CIA triad. And so that's on the outset of what is data privacy and what is information security. I have also presented a small diagram in terms of showing what are the subtopics, or what are the other areas in terms of what is covered in privacy and data security. And when I say data security, you would have often come across concepts like encryption, network security, access control, activity monitoring, breach monitoring, and DLP, which is data leakage prevention, and so on. So when we say data privacy, it predominantly starts with your data discovery, data subject access right, consent, third-party management of what data they handle, and data removal, and the policy set forth for data privacy. So one fundamental question, which is very simple, is like privacy revolves around what data and why this is needed. And information security is mostly in terms of enforcing these policies and how do you protect this particular data. So these two domains are different, and they should not be actually interchangeably used, and they have their own set of merits, but they have a lot of things in common. So that is why we thought of bringing this Venn diagram to show there is definitely a overlap between privacy and security, because to enforce privacy, we need security as a baseline, and without security, you cannot implement or enforce data privacy. And security alone cannot guarantee you the data privacy. So this is something very important for each and everyone who's starting this journey of GDPR or CIPPE certification. And with this curious thought process, I think we'll start our CIPPE bootcamp training. And feel free to type in your question on this a particular crux of topic. And if you have any set of so why we are here, as I said, we are going to discuss on data privacy certifications. When I say data privacy certification, the uh, uh, leading body that presents data privacy certification is IAPP. IAPP stands for International Association of Privacy Professionals, and it's an excellent platform for you for resources and building up your career. So we have four important certifications on for data privacy. The first one is CIPP, which is Certified Information Privacy Professional, and the second one is Certified Information Privacy Manager. Third is Certified Information Privacy Technologist, and fourth is not essentially a certification. It's more on once you complete certain set of requirements, you will be awarded this particular uh, what we call as a certification. Also, it's a IAPP Fellow of Information Privacy, which is FIP. So when we say CIPP, it revolves in terms of laws and regulations, the global standards for go-to person for privacy laws, regulations, and frameworks. And as I said, CIPP is revolving laws and regulations. So you will see this particular certification is actually has four different versions, and those versions are for particular directed towards those particular regulations. And one is CIPPE, which is your Europe, which is GDPR, and then we have one for Asia, covering Singapore, India predominantly, and then what we have is for US private sector, and then also we have one for Canada. So we have four versions of this certification, and CIPM is the one and only certification that's addressing the managerial capability and how do you handle data privacy on a day-to-day operations. And CIPT is for the technology folks who are working in IT sector, and it helps you how to develop data privacy requirement into tools and technologies, and how do you implement a very important concept like data privacy by design and default. So once you have two of this certification, and which is CIPP or CIPM and or CIPT, then you are eligible for IAPP FIP, and for that you need to demonstrate 3 years of work experience. So that's the overview of certifications that are available with IAPP. And so let's move on to the next topic. Now we saw the different versions which are available for CIPP. Now we will be focusing on the GDPR, which is CIPPE. Why should someone should take up this particular certification? This certification is a global industry standard for professionals entering and working in the field of data privacy, and there is no certification equivalent to the standard which CIPP helps you demonstrate your knowledge. That's definitely one of a key differentiator in the market, because there are certain different certifications which are coming through, but this certification has been in the market for I would say nearly 3-4 years, and it's sort of a benchmark in the industry currently. And it, achieving this particular credential will help you demonstrate your knowledge of principles based on framework and knowledge base in information privacy with European context, including critical topics like SCREMAS 2 and GDPR. So for people who are not familiar with SCREMAS 2, SCREMAS 2 is one of the lawsuit that was filed by Max Cremas. It's one of the very important judgment that came on the topic of international data transfer. And so these are some of the very important topics that is touched upon this particular course. So that gives you a practical knowledge on the day-to-day happenings as well. So you will be recognized as part of. So I'm seeing some questions. What is the basic difference between IAPP and CDPSE is predominantly, as I said, it goes into CIPT category of you will be looking into certified. Uh, so am I audible? There is someone saying no voice. So CDPSE provided by IAPP is again is a certified data solution engineer, and so it clearly has a distinction where in CIPPE you're gonna have an in-depth understanding of laws and regulations, and CIPM focus as a manager how you handle the day-to-day data privacy operations, and CIPT, as I said, is a privacy technologist. I would say CIPT on a larger picture maps with CDPSE, but so CDPSE is recently launched, and I would say if you ask me which is the go-to certification, or any international organization who is trying to hire a data protection officer or a data privacy manager are currently looking into the IAPP certifications. So moving on to the very important topic. So once you have CIPPE designation, and that definitely elevates your leadership profile among your colleagues. So this can also be one of the points why you prefer CAPP versus CDPSE, because this designation keeps you in the level of leadership role, where CDPSE we are trying to maybe you're storming into the data privacy field as a solution engineer. It's a entry level certification, I would say, but rather CIPP is something which gives you a leadership profile. And adding a CIPM on top of it, you'll be uniquely equipped to fulfill the DPO requirements of GDPR. That's really fantastic in terms of anyone who wants to make a career in data privacy, isn't it? So when I say DPO, data protection officer, is something in India, it's not gained momentum, but when we see the future, when the data privacy law, which is PDPP, enacted uh, uh, in maybe next 1 or 2 years, you will definitely see a huge number of openings coming in terms of data protection officers or data privacy managers. So internationally right now, many European and US organizations are hiring DPO or data privacy managers, and to fulfill that, a baseline requirement is something what we need is a CIPPE and CIPM certification. And this is something anyone who wants to make a career of data privacy needs to definitely look in. And CIPP is a key benchmark, as I said, among the top employers. You can check yourself, maybe check in LinkedIn, and you'll see many job openings will have this as a baseline requirement. And as I said, there is a lot to know, there is a lot at stake, and there's a lot of opportunity for privacy professional with the right training and education. So we'll see why this is the training is very important in the next slide. In this slide, we are going to look into the exam introduction and coverage. And for the people who are not aware of this particular certification, how this is working through. So this exam has around 90 questions, and out of which, interestingly, only 75 questions are marked. So which means you don't know which 25 questions are not evaluated for scoring. And the total time for this exam is 2.5 hours, and there is no previous experience or educational prerequisite required. And that's one of the questions that was asked in the chat box. As I said, so many of these questions which you will be asking in the chat, I think will be answered in the subsequent slides. That's why I'm not taking them right away. And so definitely there is no prerequisite that is required for this exam. And but not for comparatively, if you see ISACA certifications, there is a requirement maybe 3 to 5 years where you need to have a prior experience for you to claim that exam, claim that particular certification. You can give exam still in ISACA, but you can pass the exam, but you need that experience to be demonstrated for you to attain CISA or CISM. So, but that's the difference with IAPP. You don't have this prerequisite for you to have, but it's generally said that without having a good background knowledge, you shouldn't attempt it right away because the exam is definitely tough. Okay. And another important reason that you shouldn't take it right away, even as that the exam doesn't require prerequisite, is the cost of this exam, which you see in the next point. Uh, and another point which I mentioned there is that you can take this exam once you are enrolled. You can take it within 1 year of your purchase. At the time of writing, the cost of exam is around $550. That roughly works around like 42,000 rupees currently. And upon passing this exam, you need to pay $250, which is again around 18,000 something. So in total, this exam cost you something around 60,000. That's quite heavy, isn't it? So that's the reason I would suggest that investing this much amount of money, you need someone to train you, and you can't take a risk with this particular certification. And this, so there are two options. One, you can pay using certification fee for 2 years, or you can become a member. So this certification maintenance fee, which is paid for 2 years, is $250. Or if you become a member, you need to pay $275 per year. So there are different benefits. If you become an annual member, you have exclusive access to wonderful materials which are available in IAPP. And if you don't wish to become a member, you need to pay a mandatory $250, which is valid for 2 years. So what's next? You cleared the exam. Do you need to rewrite this exam at the end of 2 years? Not required. Uh, Giving this exam at this cost, you don't expect to do that, but you have to maintain something is called CPE, which is continuous professional education, and you need to maintain a minimum of 20 CPE credits. And so this ensures that you are continuously learning data privacy, because this data privacy domain is ever evolving, and you need to keep yourself abreast of the changes what's happening around in data privacy. And this is why many certification body, including ISACA or IC Square, for this matter, or IPP, have this mandate of CPEs. So moving on, how to prepare for this exam. This is one of the very important question everyone has in their mind. So the first and foremost steps that are there is self-assess. So you have something called body of knowledge that's provided by IAPP itself. So IAPP outlines the information covered in the exam and represents the depth of knowledge that qualifies a candidate, right? So it provides you the list of topics that needs to be covered part of this particular certification, and that gives you a clear idea what are the topics that you need to prepare for this exam. And the next important resource is the exam blueprint. And the exam, so I'll show you the body of knowledge as well as the exam blueprint at the end of the presentation. I have a slide on that. So the exam blueprint is another essential resource that gives you how many questions are going to come from each and every topic. So you can use it as a map out to study strategy, allowing more time for topics with many questions. So that's a very simple strategy. Like basis the number of questions you have on topic, you can prioritize topics, as well as once you have a clear exam blueprint in terms of how many. There are three sections. and each section carries a minimum and a maximum set of questions, and basis that you can clearly strategize how you will prepare yourself, how will you spend time for each and every section. And it is important that you need to score equally on all the three sections. You just cannot focus on one particular section and leave any one section. So you need to get a clear passing score between all the three sections. So I think I would also mention one important thing when I said there are three sections you need to equally score. The exam is scored between 100 to 500, the minimum mark being 100 and maximum is 500. You need to get a passing score of 300. So please don't translate it to a rough mathematical average of 60%, but that's not the case. This exam would require, at least in my view, is like 80% of general correct answers. If you are practicing yourself, you should keep a benchmark of 80% or a minimum of 75%. So that's when you should feel yourself ready for the exam. And so yeah, so when I say 300 marks, so you need to demonstrate your competence in all the three sections. Okay, so we'll quickly look into the sections in subsequent slides. So I understand you would be eager to look at the slides, look at the three sections. We'll cover that. And as I said, the first step is you assessing yourself. When you look into the topics, if you are already a practitioner, you would see certain topics you are very familiar. There are certain topics which you are not. So you can definitely put forth your strategy in terms of how you're going to focus on different topics. So then we have the textbook. The textbook is again from IIPP. It's an official text, which is the second edition of Eduardo Ustran, CIPP-E. And we are looking into the third edition coming into for this particular textbook. And so you don't need to be worried about it, because generally the changes which are brought between editions are clearly mapped. And even if you have the second edition, that's more than sufficient, because you can clearly bridge out the gaps which are there, or maybe the new topics which are brought in. You can refer IIPP or different resources which are available in the internet. So that's something you can bank upon. And once you have the textbook, you will have to decide how much time you need to spend for covering each and every chapter. You should take your knowledge and experience into account when deciding this. As I said, this is again a very important factor. And highlight important points in each chapter and review each chapter before moving on. This is very important, because you might get lost in terms of there are certain technical nuances that comes when you're studying laws and regulation. It is important for you to highlight certain important areas whatever you're reading part of this chapter. And as I said, when you're preparing for CIPPE, the practical application of the legal requirement is very, very important. So that is when you need to read a lot and understand this. uh, Another method what generally people do is create flashcards, because you're gonna have so many terminologies coming through, and it's important for you need to have flashcards created. And there are a lot of sites that can help you create flashcards, and this is a very simple way memory technique, I would say, you can use in terms of keeping yourself memorizing, or no need to memorize, but keeping yourself in the midst of thing, that you keep recollecting certain terminologies. For example, what is a pseudonymization, what is anonymization, and there are so many technical and legal terms that comes into your way, and you need to look into these terms periodically so that it stays in your memory. And so the exam is going to definitely test those topics in one way or the other. And you can also refer to IAPP's glossary, and that glossary is also very illustrative one, which you can definitely look into some unfamiliar terms. They give a clear-cut definitions, and I personally felt a lot of questions can also come directly from the nuances which are there in the definition itself. Moving on, another important strategy which many people use to prepare for this exam is creating a study group. And you find a lot of study groups that are there in Facebook, or colleagues who take up of these training courses, even from InfosecTrain, they create a study group among themselves. And it's a very brilliant way of preparing for the exam, because this exam is something you will realize that it's more of knowledge sharing, and a person can bring an experience from a different field. Maybe he's working in a banking sector, someone is working in a IT field, and there is a person who's coming from core industries. So there are different set of people who come into the midst of scheme, and they can bring varied application of laws and regulations. And when you study as a group, definitely you will have a lot of input coming from different people. And then we'll move on to the next one, using questions to find answer. So I recently saw IAPP has updated the set of questionnaires. So IAPP provides, earlier used to provide 25 set of questions, and so that is at a cost maybe something around 3,000 to 4,000. I don't remember the exact number, but that's definitely something everyone advises to test yourself as a benchmark. Are you ready for the exam? And that gives you a sort of where you need to prepare, because that the questions are mostly it helps you to understand how IAPP questions are structured. And although only 25 question was definitely a sort of area which IAPP had to improve, and the people who are taking this exam now are very lucky, because very recently there was an update. IAPP has come up with 90 questions. I think it's for the same cause. So that's a very excellent opportunity for use this particular Q&A from IAPP to test yourself how much you're prepared before you take the exam. And there was a question in terms of what are the resources which is available for the exam. So these are some of the very important resource, I would say, when I prepared also. These are the ones which I use personally. And the official text, which is from EDPB, and as well as the GDPR legislation official text. So these links are available. You can, the GDPR official text is something which will give you the actual requirement of GDPR, but the implementation part or the application of the law is something very important for the exam. So that is where you will look into EDPB and ICO. EDPB and ICO are regulators of data privacy. So EDPB is the overall governing body for GDPR, and ICO is the UK data privacy regulator. So these, and apart from that, there are other regulators which are like AEPD, which is a Spanish one, and so there are other regulators which are from the European, also releases guidelines from time to time. But predominantly ICO and EDPB are excellent resources for understanding the application of each and every requirement which is mentioned in the GDPR official text. And as I said, from IAPP, you have the body of knowledge which we already looked at, and we have a exam blueprint, and there is a certification candidate handbook. How do I know what? Okay, I'll look at that question again. So certification candidate handbook. This handbook essentially covers most of the elements which we discussed today. For someone who is starting the GDPR for the first time, I'd recommend you to go through this very famous and useful YouTube training, which is GDPR overview under 60 minutes. And I think it's from Phil Fisher. It's an excellent resource for you to get a overview on GDPR. Apart from that, I personally used the some of the exam practice material. Without exam practice, you cannot clear this exam. That is quite obvious, because studying the concept and theory is one part, but practicing with the exam questions is the most important part, I would recommend. And in this case, so some of the resources are European Privacy Law and Practice Exam by Jasper Jacobs. There are two books, which is Red and Blue book, and there is another famous material which is by Majid Hatemin. and that is also a collection of practice exams. So both these resources are available in Amazon. And apart from that, you have some more materials, more Q&As which are available in market, but slightly be careful to pick the Q&A from reputable sources. Otherwise, there is a lot of materials which are available in online. They say these are the dumps for IAPP, but definitely don't fall prey for them, because many of them contain a lot of wrong answer and that can actually corrupt your concept. So it's very important you pick and choose the right materials for you to prepare for the exam. Moving on, let me give my exam experience. So this exam definitely test your complete understanding and application of GDPR regulation. And I found this exam definitely tricky, confusing, and vague at times because of the nature of how the questions are prepared and how the wordings are structured. So one requires a lot of patience and skill to overcome these challenges. I prepared my outline from the book and included key points from other sources. So preparing an outline is a very good strategy, because once you have your own outline, this will become a very valuable resource when you're going to sit for the exam in next 1 week. You actually cannot go through all the resources that you have collated, and there are so much of resources which you would have gone through for the preparation. And when I see this point, IAPP recommends like you need to have 60 hours of preparation, but I personally feel somewhere 100 hours or something more than that is required for someone who is seasoned professional data privacy. Maybe 60 hours could be adequate, but in our view that maybe it requires some more time, because understanding this concept and application of them will require some time. uh, read read the exam experience of different candidates to get an exam flavor and devise your own strategy. That's one of the smart way. There are groups and there are successful candidates sharing their experience that gives a lot of a flavor of how exactly the exam tested them. They, although they might not share the exact questions, but definitely they will share some interesting perspectives that can shape your strategy and prepare yourself better for facing this exam. uh, for section one is revolving into the history of GDPR and data privacy laws. That's something that will really test your memory, because you will be seeing so many dates, so many titles and laws, and it really tests your memory skills. So what you can do is prepare a table in terms of chronological order, who implemented what at what date, and what is the crux of that particular law. And that is something which really helped me. And you can also prepare a list of popular case laws and GDPR fines. This is one of the important topics that you need to prepare, because that is definitely tested in the exam. Because I myself, when I had the exam, I had a lot of questions related to some of the famous case laws. And practice the exam from Udemy, Jasper Jacob books. Exam was difficult compared to both these resources. As I said, you have different resources, but the actual exam is much more difficult than any of these resources which are available in the market. Maybe Majid Hikman is something which is slightly close in terms of difficulty. That's what people used to say. But other resources are definitely way easier than the actual exam. But don't spend too much money, because there are certain courses which are available in the market at a huge price, like maybe 30,000, 20,000. uh, in my view, you don't need to spend that much. Rather, you need to have a person training you, because having a questionnaire is something you will do at the last step, but understanding this concept, understanding how do you apply them is more important. Once you have this, it's going to be pretty easy for you to apply them in the and crack the questions easily. uh, so then finally use the Quizlet for revising. That is what I said in terms of just having those flashcards. You can use them in form of Quizlet and you can prepare it before the exams. So that is my exam experience, and covering the last few topics, which is the exam strategy. So the exam strategy is like I actually use this content one of the famous Facebook groups, because this is what exactly many of you can follow as well. And so first and foremost, you pay attention to the detail, because there is going to be a lot of distractors in the questions, and the question itself might be hiding within this four statements or five statements, which where you need to identify that, and maybe you can eliminate the distractors. And for this is very common method if you are given other certification exam, that you can follow the elimination approach, where you can eliminate the answers which are not relevant, and then maybe generally it will be the option of selecting between two answers, and out of that you can select one. And sometimes it becomes really difficult between selecting two answers, and the best method is go with your gut instinct, because data privacy involves a lot of perspectives, and sometimes people get confused with those perspectives. But if you have studied properly and if you have really understood the concept, go with your first gut instinct, what you felt with the answer. If you keep revolving with the same question and answer, it's gonna affect your overall performance in the exam, as well as you're gonna consume a lot of time. So don't dwell. It's the same point. It's correlation to the previous point. If you feel like you're taking too long in one question, mark it and come back, and you may learn more information in the remaining question itself. That's something you can think about, because a question's answer might be addressed maybe somewhere down the line in some other questions, so that can also help you. So mark those questions. In scenario based question, that's a very important topic. You're gonna have a handful of scenario based questions in the exam. That's gonna that's gonna test your skills which you are done in maybe your 9th or 10th standard or 12th standard of your schooling, because you're gonna have a long passage to read and then have a set of questions. And what happens is a lot of people used to forget the entire concept of what is mentioned within after reading a long passage. So there is another method. What people used to say is that maybe quickly have a look at the questions and then probably start reading the scenario, so that you can filter out all the unnecessary information and focus on what is required from the passage. And don't go back over questions you have already answered. There is no time for second guessing yourself. So these are some of the really time and tested strategies which can be really helpful for you when you go for the exam. So coming to our the final sections, I think I'll quickly take the questions for the last 10 minutes. So why InfosecTrain, and what is the key differentiator when you're going to take up this particular course? So post this webinar, uh, uh, we'll be starting our data CIPP certification course, and why one should opt this. So the right section of this is more important. We are going to have a very practical and quality preparation. This is not going to be just touching the overview of these topics, but we are going to do a very practical questions preparation, and we are going to balance the knowledge and passing the exam. So the focus is not just going to be understanding the GDPR regulation like a lawyer, but we are going to also focus on how we are going to clear this exam, what are the nuances required. uh, Case study approach, that's one of very important method we are going to use. So we will be looking into some cases and how do we handle that. Periodic quiz resembling the exam difficulty. So we have picked up some questions which is definitely going to test you, and it might definitely help you to get a flavor of the actual exam. And time to time you'll get some wonderful exam preparation guidance, which I'll personally pass it on whenever we're reading particular topics. For example, if data subject rights, we are dealing one particular topic which is very important, what are the possible scenario questions, or what are the possible areas that usually gets tested during the exam, and something I'll pass on during the course of the training. So what we will be learning from this training, we'll be covering these important sections, which is introduction to the European data protection, which is the section 1 essentially. European regulatory institutions, which are again tied to the first section. Legislative framework, that is the whole crux of this entire certification. Then we'll be touching on international data transfer, then compliance with European data protection laws and regulations. So this is what you will learn from this particular training on CIPPE. And as I promised earlier, I'll show you, this is the exam blueprint as well as the exam body of knowledge. If you see the left hand section, that is your body of knowledge, and on right hand section you have the minimum and maximum questions. So time required. So this is something is going to be updated, and we are switching from 4 hours to 3 hours basis the request of participants. And so you can focus on how much minimum questions and maximum questions are going to be asked for each and every section. Basis that you can cover your strategy. So I may not have time to run through each and every topics, but you can see for yourself. These are some of the important areas for you to know when you're going to start your data privacy implementation journey. So I think that's it from my side in terms of what content I had to present for you.